For today's lesson, which is day 3 in Unit 10, we have a couple of vocabulary words that we have to make sure that we get introduced to you. One of them is called the angle of elevation. We know that to elevate means to go up, and if we are looking in the picture over here at this person who's at point B, if they're just standing there and they're looking straight ahead, their line of sight would be right here along the horizontal. If they hear their friend call them and their friend is in a higher location, their line of sight has to elevate to look up at their friend. This angle that's here that shows the movement of the eyes as the head elevates back is the angle of elevation. If you are the person who's at the top of the stairs, your line of sight naturally flows along the horizontal that's here. And if the friend down below yells to you, your line of sight would be depressed, creating the angle of depression as you look down at your friend. I want you to notice that the angle of depression and angle of elevation are formed by parallel lines that are cut by a transversal, which means that my angle of elevation and my angle of depression in this picture are exactly the same. The reason why we need to talk about this is because we will get involved in some problems that deal with the angle of elevation and angle of depression, and you have to know where those are in order to answer the question. So for the first example, we're talking about Scott, whose eye level is 1.5 meters above the ground. So in this particular example, Scott has an eye level that's 1.5 meters above the ground. And it says in here that he is 30 meters away from a tree. So if I measure to the tree, I have 30 meters over here. It says that Scott's angle of elevation as he looks up from his normal horizontal line of sight, as he looks up at the bird in the tree, creates an angle of elevation of 36 degrees. The question is asking how far the bird is above the ground. So I am essentially looking for this distance right here. What I am going to do in this question, though, is I am going to focus on this triangle that's right here, which is a right triangle, has a base of 30, because the distance from Scott here to the tree is the same thing as it is from here to the tree. And I am essentially going to look for this, which is x over here. So I'm looking for the x that's here. I probably should not call that x, though, now that I'm looking at it. I should probably call this y, because we already have that other place over here, the whole height, labeled as x. And in this particular case, at the end, when I'm actually answering their question, which is what the height of the bird is, I am going to have to take whatever I get for my y value, which is here, and add the 1.5 to it. So I'm going to have to go in and add the 1.5. So when I take a look at what I have that's going on here, I can see that with respect to this angle, I have the opposite and the adjacent, which tells me that I'm using tangent. So tangent of 36 equals y over 30, which means when I cross multiply and solve, I'm going to get 30 tangent 36. And if I use my calculator for this, I end up getting that that value of y turns out to be 21.796,275,48. When they're asking me for the actual height of the bird above the ground, remember I have to go back in here now and take my y value and add 1.5 to it. So my x value is going to be the y plus the 1.5, which will give me 23.296,275,84. This question is asking me to round to the nearest hundredth, so my final answer in this case, 23.30 to the nearest hundredth. So this has a little bit more intuition. It's not just about the triangle that's formed. It's also about the height of Scott's line of sight that we have to take into consideration here. Going on to the next page, perfect setup for angles of elevation and angles of depression. We can see here they're talking about John, who has an angle of depression of 40 degrees. Because of that angle of depression, I know that that angle of depression is going to occur up here at the top. It's telling me that his angle of depression is about 1.8 meters from the rooftop. So I've got a little 1.8 in here, and it says that he is watching his friend down here creating an angle of elevation of 40 degrees. It says the rooftop is 16 meters from the ground, creating an entire height of 17.8. It's asking what the distance is between John's friend and the building, which is where the X is going to go right here. The 40 degrees that we have for the angle of depression is not especially helpful where it is because it's not inside of our triangle. So I'm going to take this angle of 40 and I'm going to move it over here. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to calculate. I am looking for X. So I am going to do the tangent of 40 is equal to 17.8 over X. I'm going to cross multiply and solve. And I will end up with an answer of 19 point, which when I round to the nearest tenth gives me 19.1. For question number 4, same idea. There is a lighthouse that a person is standing at the top of. The lighthouse does sit on this cliff. So here's my lighthouse. And there's a person up there on the top of that lighthouse. And the lighthouse itself is 28 meters tall, and it sits on a cliff that's 45 meters tall, which creates an entire height of 73 meters. It says that somebody is standing on the top of the lighthouse and spots a ship out at sea. So here's where the water is. Somewhere out here we have a ship. The angle of depression, remember, normal line of sight goes this way. Somebody's angle of depression has to tilt downward to look at the ship out at sea. And we're asked for the horizontal distance between the lighthouse and the ship. So between the lighthouse and the ship is what we're looking for. And we can see that there's a little right triangle that is formed here. The information that I know is that this angle of depression matches the angle of elevation. I'm going to pull that triangle, that angle inside the triangle. Over here I do have a height of 73. So when I go through to solve now, based on the 20-degree angle, I am using the tangent of 20 equals 73 over X. When I go through and cross multiply to solve, I end up with, this is 73 divided by the tangent of 20, which gives me 200.5658516 to the nearest meter of 201. I think on the last one I might have written something incorrect. I just want to go back and look. I did. This should be 17.8 divided by the tangent of 40. I think I had written multiply. The number is correct, I believe, but it should have been divided by. Okay, question number 4. Question number 4 is referring to the line that's tilted, and it wants to know what the slope of the line is. If we consider this the horizontal, we can see that we have an angle of depression, so this is a negative angle, and we are being asked to find the slope. Now, under normal circumstances, when we find the slope, we do rise over run. or change in y over change in x, however we want to look at it. But one thing that you would want to notice in a situation like this is that with respect to this 36-degree angle, this is the opposite and this is the adjacent, which means that if we're doing the rise over the run, we're technically doing opposite over adjacent, which means we're really doing tangent. So this is technically the tangent of 36, and we have to remember that we've got to put a negative in here because it's a negative angle. It's an angle of depression. So on my calculator, I can type in negative tangent 36 and end up with rounded to 4 decimal places, negative 0.7265. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to work on questions 5, 6, and 7, and then I'll come back and I'll do the work for those. For question number 5, this does talk again about the tangent in respect to it actually looking for the slope of the line. Remember, the slope of the line equals rise over run, also equals opposite over adjacent, the rise over the run, opposite over adjacent, which defines tangent for us. And in this case, because it's an angle of depression, it's falling below the horizontal, it's going to be the negative tangent. So this is negative tan 24, which when I type that on my calculator, gives me a big decimal. Rounded to 4 decimal places. Question 6 is talking about Samuel, who is at the top of a tower and planning to ride a trolley down a zip line to the lower tower. The total vertical drop of the zip line is 40 feet. What that means is that if we were to measure how far of a change there is in this section, it would be 40. The zip line's angle of elevation from the lower tower is 11.5, so that means that in here is an angle of 11.5, and it's asking to find the horizontal distance between the two towers. So how far is it from one to the other? So in this particular case, when I go through and solve, again, I'm using tangent because it's opposite over adjacent. I'm going to cross multiply and solve, so I end up with 40 divided by the tangent of 11.5, which gives me, for an answer, 196.6062812, and rounded 197 feet. Rounded to the nearest foot. So again, we're just going through and applying the tangent. They're just giving us more word problems to go through and practice with. Question number 7, they do not draw us a picture. It's one of those where we're in charge of drawing our own. It says find the height of the tree. If the tree casts a shadow that's 24 feet long, now just keep in mind, your shadow is always on the ground. So the sun is up here, shining down, and the tree's shadow is going to be right here on the ground. Doesn't get up and walk around behind it, it's always on the ground. And it says that the angle of elevation to the sun is 52 degrees, wants to know the height of the tree. So I am essentially looking for how tall this tree is over here. And again, that is a perfect setup for tangent. I've got the tangent of 52 equals x over 24. Cross multiply and solve. Final answer in this case, 31, the height of the tree to the nearest foot. It's very important in here that you realize that part of what you need to be responsible for is how to set up this equation, how to pick sine, cosine, or tangent, make sure your fraction is the right way. Step 2, how to cross multiply and solve. And then step 3, sometimes overlooked, almost thought to be too easy, is how do you put that into your calculator? So you need to make sure in each of these that although you are copying the notes down, that you also are going through this process of the steps, making sure that you know how to get the right answers on those.